But notice she's looking at me adoringly on this slide. So whatever I say is
No,
gonna have...
no, that's her rolling her eyes.
Ah.
I thought that was like a superiority thing, like that guy. Like,
welcome everyone. Welcome to the August 9th episode of Ask Some Praxis. We have a complete crew today, so happy to have everybody here. And let's get going because we're going to do tips and tricks for customizing PnP Modern Search. So this was a user requested episode. So I think we've got everybody in on the game today almost. So we're going to be talking about creating an information architecture. So essentially this is a lot of tips and tricks. So we're going to talk about sorting content and sortable title. And so there's some special stuff to talk about with that. And then we're going to go into the various ways we can customize the way we display data. So Derek's going to help us talk through mapping metadata and managing columns. And then I'm going to do a little bit into tweaking the display with handlebars, templates, and result templates. And so we'll jump into that when we get there. All right, so our use case, we're going to be pulling a subset of data based on metadata, potentially also for multiple locations. And so that's a general goal that we want to use the PnP Modern Search web parts for. And so there's just so many implementations of that we can do. And so it becomes this sort of Swiss Army knife when we can customize those display templates. So let's start with creating the information architecture. And Mark, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. So, to me, the root of all good things are a good information architecture, pretty much everything that I do. But when we create content types, we really and use them and make sure that content has a content type assigned to it other than document or item or event, then we can start doing some really nice things with search. So this slide is about one of the things that you want to think about as you're building your content type information architecture. You're building the hierarchy of content types that you might use for your content. You might inherit from document for a lot of your documents for your organization. And usually actually most of us will create sort of this interstitial content type called the organizational based document or, client name based document. And by creating that and inheriting from that for everything else that's custom, we can say things like, show us all of our custom stuff, all of the stuff that we've categorized in a search experience. Next layer might be we inherit from organizational based document for something like contract. There are contracts across the organization. We want to make sure that we can roll up contracts from wherever they are stored. So we would use that contract content type if we just have a generic contract. Or we could have more useful content types that are things like real estate contract or employment contract, and they would have slightly different metadata, potentially, other than just the content type name. So for example, a real estate contract might have the property address, the employment contract might have the employee name. So if you think about your information architecture in a hierarchy like this, you're going to be positioned far better for some of the spiffy stuff you can do with PnP Modern Search. And you'll probably see some examples that will take advantage of an IA like this.
Okay, cool. That is great information to get started on for sure. Here's an example, right?
Oh, yeah, something I actually did for a couple of clients where they wanted to show the people in the organization who had birthdays today. And Derek, I know you've built this for at least one client as well. We can do this with PnP Modern Search, but again, we have to have that information architecture set up ahead of time. So we're using, in this case, refinable date 02. And so we've mapped the people SPS birthday managed or so crawled property to that managed property. And then we can filter for dates that are today and this month and this day and display the results in a PnP Modern Search results web part. Just the search results web part. Don't need a search box, don't need a refiner, don't need anything else. But by having a query that grabs the data we want and then making sure that we're using the local people results result source, we can grab those objects and display them in the page. And in this case, I've actually customized the display a little bit with a tiny little snippet of handlebars, but Derek and Julie will get into how that works. I've just changed the format of that date so it doesn't look like a big long data date.
I think it's time to update Lester's profile picture too.
Lester's been through the ringer. You know,
the lighting on this
he's had a lot of birthdays. It doesn't say how old he is.
not his good side. Yeah, we need to do Lester a solid.
I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but that refinable date managed property is pretty powerful because it has that refiner ability in the property versus other managed properties, which things get that you just have, but you're not able to refine them, but you can use them in PnP Modern Search. So I think we'll address that later. I think we're going to do a debate. I'm voting for Emily. I'm pretty sure she's going to win no matter what. So.
But notice she's looking at me adoringly on this slide. So whatever I say.
No, that's her rolling her eyes.
I thought that was like a superiority thing, like that guy, like.
Oh, awesome! Thank you, Jason. All right, so Emily, let's get into this sorting by relevance or title.
Sure. So one of the things that Mark and I most love to do is, of course, debate about information architecture. And I have the joy of being the last person to edit these slides, so I can sneak in things that we're always debating about. So this is a topic that we talk about a lot because we both align completely on the interstitial content types. And recently, I've been trying to convince Mark, let's see if I can sell it today, that making a calculated column called sortable title equal to your title that is then hidden in your interstitial content type is important because you'll automatically have a sortable title field anytime that you are inheriting from that for all of your other future content types. Now, I totally hear and agree with Mark's argument that if there is a search box present, that we want to return those results by relevance, but I think that we have a lot of examples to sort by relevance or title. And while I'm looking at this, I was so excited about making the slide. I have a typo on it. It shouldn't say relevance examples. It should say title examples. So I think I get some points docked off of my argument on that one.
Yeah, you win. I agree with you.
So wait a minute. Where's the debate part? You were saying that all the things that I would say.
Whether sortable title should really be in that interstitial content type. Do you need it enough times? And the reason I like to do it is just because you have to do some republishing funny things when you add it later, and it could be a headache.
Yeah. If you think that you're going to use that sortable title in enough ways, I would totally agree. I think that I've had a lot of clients say, I want all the results to be presented back to me alphabetically. And then I have to have the discussion with them about, well, here's what happens when you do that, right? If there's a search box, for example, and you search for, I don't know, contract, you're going to get things back in relevance order. So something that has a contract in the title is going to be higher up than something that has contract, in the 16th paragraph. So that actually matters. And if you are showing the results in alphabetical order and the titles of the documents don't really, if they start with the, for example, that's not helpful. So when you, Emily, are curating the content and you're deciding what goes on the page, I would expect that you're almost always doing exactly the right thing. Here's a small subset of documents. We're going to display them based on their title sorted. In most cases, though, where we're building these search-based result sets, there are more than what fits on a page, and we actually want them to show up based on relevance. So both are useful. You just have to think about when to use each.
I think I like the idea of being prepped, though. Like if you're going to set something up and you've sort of reset that up so it's just there and you don't have to think about it and go back to it, that feels pretty powerful and not like a lot of extra. Like you've just done it. You're always inheriting from that content type. And so now you don't have to worry about, oh, well, I don't have it. I have to go back and add it to do this and republish and all that kind of stuff. So I could see the argument for doing it from the get-go. All right, Well, let's move on to displaying the content. This is sort of the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about. Derek, why don't you start first? We're going to do using slots to display data.
Yep. All right. So this didn't come out nearly as big as I wanted the picture to come out, but that's okay. So one of the things that we can do with the PnP search is leverage this concept of slots. And essentially slots are tokens that you can use to, they're tokens that you can use to read data from your search results and map a specific amount of data, or a specific metadata field to them. They often get overlooked, but to get to them, you have to make sure that you have the selected managed property coming back. So you can see here under selected properties, we've got created, and then that created field is being pulled in via the slot to this card on the left-hand side. To access the slots, at the very top, there's this little button that gets missed a lot under layout slots, and you click the customize button, and then you're brought to the layout slot screen. And from here, you can see right here that we've got date slot mapped to created. But say we want this to be last modified, right? Because the created date isn't relevant to whatever scenario we're doing. Or say it's a custom date, like it's a disposal date or something. You can change this to be map to whatever date field you want, and it will show up. So in this example here with the card, that's created date, but we could change it to modified and it would show up as modified. So we really have a lot of flexibility here, because then we don't have to change our templates. We just need to change the, oh, here we go. We just need to change the actual fields themselves, the mapping of the field, the slot themselves. So it's really nice so that you can basically get all the templates set up the way you want. And then if you want to change the fields, you can do that. All right. Next slide. So I'm going to show how to, yeah.
Could I just toss a thought in there? One thing you got to be careful with when you're changing what's in a slot is that you're potentially changing the user experience, right? So if you change that date, but you haven't sort of given some context for the user, they may think that it's the created date, but you've swapped it with something else. So you always want to think about how are you going to convey the fact that you're using a different date in this case, date, in a different location, in that same location in the page.
I would,
sorry.
I mean, you and Emily have way more experience than I do on this one. I don't tend to use the card view very often. Do you?
Yeah. No.
No? Because generally what I use is the list, the detailed list, where I have control over the column and the header in the column. Because I'm generally presenting a list of data.
Yeah, and I think the bigger point here is, especially when you start to get into, it's that you have this layout and date is what it is, and that's used in the out-of-the-box card, and then you just need to decide what date means in this context. And so it's more about just being able to say, this is the data that matters based on the solution that I'm providing for somebody, and the page that it's on and where it is, and maybe what other things you put on the page are going to help give context to that thing. I don't think there's, I mean, I agree with what Mark's saying. You won't want to be just remapping that willy-nilly after you've already deployed it. It's more about the slots are mapped to the display layout. So that you don't have to go in and actually change the layout of the card to get the right thing. You're just going to map them to the places that are where you want the data you're pulling back based on the context of what you're pulling back into the right spots on the card or the list or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. All of those things. And David's actually saying some things in the chat that says slots can also be empty. And I think this is, as I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So here I'm using the cards layout, but you can also use details list a little farther down on the page. And this is on the second screen of this. There's a button that says manage fields. And from here, you actually get a new screen that lets you determine like what data to pull in. And Julia, do you want to?
Oh, there it is. Sorry.
Yeah. And you're going to get a screen that looks a little like this. There's a little pencil in the corner. And on that little pencil, that lets you edit the handlebars. And you get to do a couple of different things here. You're not going to do like a full-on big custom template. Here, you're just editing the content that you're putting, the content that you want to put for that one field. So if it's a date field, and like Mark had, where he wanted to formulate it where it was day and then month, you can do that through that. If you want to do it full and do, January 1st, 2020, you can format that as well. So you can set that up here, and with just a little bit of tweak, you can customize the results.
Yep.
That's true,
So-
whether it's a date or a text column or any kind
Yeah.
of column, really. You can do manipulation with handlebars.
Yep. And just in terms of managing those columns, as a general rule, I don't edit the handlebars if I don't have to. I don't want to do a full-on template if there's not a need. If I just need to change how a date is formatted, I don't want to do a whole template just to do that. I would edit those little snippets in the columns. And then the other thing that I was saying this earlier is the detailed list offers you the most flexibility when it comes to without creating a custom template. You get to determine exactly which headers and which columns are shown, what the titles and display names are for those columns, as well as the handlebars around it. And Casper, you're right, helpers, there's a link in the resources. There's a whole series of helper functions that come as part of the PnP modern search, helps you with formatting things like dates. If you have a hyperlink field, getting either the title or the URL. If you want to compare dates, right? Or get a preview URL. Excuse me. And finally, manage metadata are a giant pain in the butt when it comes to trying to get them to display in the PnP modern search. You do need a little bit of handlebars. One of the things that I always like to do is, if possible, I will map them to the tags slot, because that comes with the handlebars needed to like loop through all the data and pull out all the GUIDs and the semicolons and pounds and stuff. And I think that's all I have.
You're right. So I'm going to take that one step further and talk about another thing that you can do, which is called result types. So the result type is sort of like the column, right? So the column can be formatted like Derek was just talking about and saying, hey, this piece of property can be, you can change the format of that little thing. A result type lets you actually write some map some stuff so that you can say, for these particular results in our result, I want a completely different layout. So you can kind of see here that I have, you can see I've picked the people layout, and then I had two results in my query, and I created a custom result type that said, if the title contains the word Julie in it, then I want to use a different result template. And so you can see now that mine looks different than Mike's profile. So Mike's profile is using the out-of-the-box people result type, and mine, because I starts with my name, is using a different one. So how that looks inside is that I clicked on that edit result types and I said, okay, when the field title contains the word Julie, then use this inline template. And so what that looks like when you click on the little pencil is that it's just an LI element with a file icon and a span that has the path, a link with the path in the title field. So I'm essentially just saying any results are going to look different than other results. And so this can be super powerful if you have a lot of content where maybe by like document type or some other, content type or something else, you want the template for the item to look slightly different. So that is super, powerful next thing that you can do when the result types are different and you want to kind of change what something look like. I think, though, I will say be careful with that, because like my example is pretty jarring, obviously. I mean, it's not meant to look good. It was meant to show the point, but you don't want the layout to be so significantly different that it's hard for a user experience perspective. So obviously don't do what I just did as a production level thing. But if you needed to like highlight a background color because of a certain content type, or extra piece of data in the title field, or whatever you might want to do, you can do that with these result types. So that's a pretty cool extra little bit of functionality. So the other thing that you can do then is go all full in. So custom display template is when you essentially can go edit the entire result template start to finish. And so what that gives you, when you click on custom, there's that edit results template thing there, and you can click on the little braces button, and that opens it up right in the web part itself. I'm going to tell you that, yes, you can use that, but I wouldn't. If it were me and I'm going to do this, that I'm going to take that content, and you certainly can use it as a starting point, so you can copy it all. I'm going to take that out and I'm going to put it in like Visual Studio Code or just some text editor, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to create a new file with like an HTML end extension, because Visual Studio Code treats it nice in there. And then I'm going to put it in a site assets folder, probably in the root site collection, so that everybody has access to it. And then I'm going to use the use external template URL field to point to that template. And that way I can, manage the template in source control. I can tweak it outside of the thing. It can be reused over and over again. It's sort of like the next level of the things. And if for some reason, horrible, the page gets broken or the web part gets deleted by mistake or whatever, you haven't lost all of your hard work, because as soon as you replace or delete this, you're going to end up losing your work. Derek, you have a question?
It's not a question, it's a statement on that exact topic, which is, if you flip from details to cards to custom to debug, so a lot of times I'll go, something won't work right, and I'll go into debug mode. You lose all of that custom formatting. So if you had gone in and created a custom template, all that would be gone if you clicked the debug button to go fix something. So +1 for the external file. That's all.
And if you're wondering, have I lost Derek's custom formatting that he's done for me on something before doing that, the answer is yes.
I was wondering that, Emily.
Yeah, right.
Clearing that up.
So when you open that results template up, there's two sections in it. So there's the data content section, and then there's the placeholder content section. So the placeholder and you'll notice both of these have a style tag and a div. And so the style tag allows you to put custom CSS in, and the div is where you put your handlebars for how you want to display that. And so the placeholder content is what shows up when there's no results. So that you want to make, usually I just leave it to whatever it is out of the box because it's good enough. But the one that you want to work with to get your custom style is the data content section. And then so that div in there and plus the styles are what you would tweak. So if we look a little bit further in, so this is that template section in the content. So essentially, you can see that we have some handlebar sections in here. The first one at the top there is the handlebars part is where the double braces are. So if you see double braces and some stuff and then some more double braces, that part, that's the part of the template that's considered handlebars. And so if you're like, hey, I don't know how to do this thing, and you're looking to like use Google or Bing to like get more information about what you're doing, this is what you're looking up when you type the word handlebars.js. So this is handlebars.js, and this is where you can go get more information about how to use them. So the #if is an out-of-the-box handlebars function for an if. And so the @root part of that is how we reference the properties in the search results that we're doing. So @root is the root of the template, and so that's the search results. So we say @root properties, and then it's saying, okay, the properties of the web part and show selected filters. So that was one of the filter options that you get when you're configuring the web part. So it's basically saying, if the show selected filters toggle is on, if the user has selected that, then this is the display template that I want to use. So if we expanded that out, you could see there's a special bit of HTML, and that's actually a web component. PnP selected filters is what's called a web component. Anyway, that is displayed if the person has show selected filters. So that's that section. Show results count is what it would be styled as for the section where it shows the result count. And so then this UL, which means unordered list is where the results are. So then that next handlebar section down is the iterator. It says each of the items in the data set as an item, and then you're going to show the select and the template and blah, blah, blah. That at the bottom there, see that's, or in the middle there with the last of my green icons, it's saying that this is the block that we'll use the default if the template doesn't match a result type. So if you remember me talking about result types, if you're using a custom template, you can still use that result type scenario. So essentially you could say, hey, this is my custom template, and this is what I want my list items to look like by default, but I'm still going to go in and create a small modification as a result type for this particular template. So this template could be like a baseline, and then you could have some extra templating that you want to do for result types. So that can be super powerful. All right, and that is sort of the end of what I had to share. We're now on that resources list, and so I kind of want to go, oh, thank you, Emily, for sorting these. That is lovable. So we've got all the refinable strings and stuff that we've covered with refinable strings. We really touched on it very lightly here, but we have a bunch of Sympraxis episodes from previous where we talked about using those refinable strings, which are super, super powerful. They're essentially the custom managed property that we can use when we need to be able to filter in the PnP modern search web part. So we need to use refinable string as the managed property in that case and map our crawled properties to them if we want to use them. So any one of those past episodes is going to give you more details on that. From the PnP modern search aspect, we have an article, I think, from Emily Mancini on the search web part, and the search helper functions. That's the ones that's a link to the ones that come out of the box but are custom for PnP modern search. So they're extra handlebars, helper functions that you have for like getting current user and actually dealing with some of those taxonomy things that Derek was referencing earlier. There's a bunch of cool helper functions that are around Microsoft 365 search result data that you might need. If you want to know more about those result types that I talked about, that's a link for that. And then I included a link to the GitHub repo that is the handlebars helpers that are embedded into the PnP modern search. So these are things for handlebars specifically that are helper functions. And if you go to that GitHub repo and just scroll down, the README there has a link to all the extra helper functions so that you can see how to use each one of those. I'm not saying it's simple, but if you did want to go down that road, that's where all those helper functions are. So like how to use an each and how to use those ifs and elses and all of that kind of stuff is all displayed in there. All right. Did we have any questions? Did anybody see any questions that I didn't notice? I can't read and talk at the same time. It's a terrible thing. Oh, Casper asked about handlebars versus adaptive cards.
Yeah. So
Derek?
do you want? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, from a definitive, the tool is going in one direction or the other. I have not heard one way or the other. I know Microsoft from a cross-browser, cross-device kind of thing is definitely pushing adaptive cards. But given that this is a web-based interface, I really don't see it needing to drive one to the other. On the other hand, I will say working with the adaptive card framework is a lot simpler than working with handlebars. And I know both. So especially from a not professional dev background, adaptive card framework might be easier.
I think I saw Caleb with his hand up. Caleb?
Yeah.
So you were talking about the people results earlier and how excuse me, how you were getting various user profile fields. Is there a way to get an easy way to get stuff mapped from AD? Like back in the day of on-prem, we would just go and say, you know, hey, I want to get this. I see Derek rolling on happening. Julie.
No, Julie and I have gone back and forth on this a million times. Like you need to write a synchronization to get the data into the slots in the user profile service.
Yeah, it's even a little more complicated than that. You might think that the answer is to use the graph search, because when you're configuring this, you can use SharePoint search or graph search.
Right.
And it seems like that's going to be the right answer. And you're like, well, of course, because there's users in graph. Well, unfortunately, yeah, I love how Todd's shaking his head.
I've had this dream
Unfortunately,
dashed by Julie already before.
yeah. Unfortunately, the search endpoint in graph uses what's called people. And you're like, well, people, yes, exactly what I want. Except
People aren't people.
not really, because people are not always users. They can be other people, they can be contacts and whatever. And so you don't get the robustness. So since it can be either, you don't get the robustness of the user profile data that you would get if it was just pointing at the user endpoint, if that makes sense to you.
Sounds like
so
something
it
that-
might work depending on what you want, but it probably won't work.
Gotcha. That sounds like something some MVPs I know ought to talk to Microsoft about.
They
You
know,
assume
they know.
I haven't.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so yeah, so I think we wrapped everything up. Our next show, and I'm calling it that on purpose. We are losing Emily and Derek on August 23rd. So, we just decided we're going to let this be the Todd show and see what he says to you all. So, tune in for the craziness, because I'm sure it will be. He's going to talk Copilot and ChatGPT to write PowerShell.
The topic you've all been wanting to hear about.
We
How I
have.
write
We
PowerShell
have.
with AI.
So definitely join us live. We have 365 EduCon in Seattle. Derek is going to head that up for us as be our member representative. Todd and Mark are going to CEF in Stockholm, which I'm totally jelly about. I wish I was going to. And then, of course, for all our New England friends or those who just want to travel to New England because it's a beautiful time of year, come join us at Collab Days New England. That's October 21st. That's a free event, and registration is open. So definitely do that. And oh, I love how you snuck this in, Emily. Microsoft 365 Miami, the call for speaker closes Friday. So get your sessions in if you want to join us and speak at Microsoft 365 Miami. The whole team is going to be there. It's our sister event. All right.
In Florida in February.
We're all there.
What's not to love?
And Cuban
what's not to
food.
love?
And Cuban food. Welcome. Thanks everybody for coming. We're at the end. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time on August 23rd. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask and Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues.